So let's get started. I'm not going to do a self-selling pitch that will be extremely narcissistic. I'll avoid that. But long story short, since I have to introduce some context, I'm the provost. I'm from Spain. I live in Asia, India, Singapore, between these two countries since the last more than 12 years. Oh, you were in the morning session, I think. I recognize your face. You're in the front row. Well, good to see you again here. You seem to like the moderating in the morning then, because you came back again. Okay. I was in another track in the last 3 hours. So anyway, long story short, I'm the provost in a university, basically what you will call the vice chancellor in the European terms, or rector. And I work in the area of two spectrums. One is cognitive psychology, and the other is the computer science / advanced quantum computing applied tools to different industries. Now, you may find this as very, very opposite fields. Actually, they aren't, because all the tools that you develop have to be humanly driven and for consumers. That's where we come in the picture. And I primarily work on, let me remove my picture from here. Well, 1 minute. There you go. Forget about this picture. Focus on the title. There are various industries that we do work with actively. One of them is the energy sector. Second one is the healthcare sector. Third one is the aviation sector, transportation sector, where we have substantial executive education as well as projects, patents published, all of them available in particularly Google Scholar, as well as other tools like Scopus. For those who are not very research well-versed, those are cumulative indexes of publications where you have all the listing of the outcomes. So that's there. We don't do anything for free. We like money quite a bit. But more importantly, as a university, we do develop projects which are real, not research which is published somewhere in the cloud and nobody cares. Only my 10 friends read it. It's actually realistic, happens on the ground reality. One of them is this one. I'll run you very quickly through it. This project, which I will not take the names of the companies on the slides because of certain privacy regulations that we signed back in the day. I don't know why we signed that, but we did sign it. So there were two particular projects we did. One was with the National Thermal Power Corporation of India, which is the public company dealing with thermal power in the country, basically the major power grid that nurtures all the electricity in the entire region of the north part of India, south part of India, which is pretty large, almost 4 times European size. So you can imagine the size of the grids. Secondly, we do this project with the Dubai Electricity and Water Authority, which is part of the government of the UAE and the government of Dubai. Well, obviously powers Dubai. So that is also what we do quite regularly. We did with them. We develop certain projects which you can observe of optimization at the ground level in those particular regions. And we do regular intervals of checks on these particular areas. Now, what those are, it's a combination of utilizing a certain number of qubits. I don't know how many of you are well-versed with the quantum realm or not, but doesn't matter. I keep the presentation pretty simple. There are two main objectives. One is obviously the optimization of resources as well as the sustainability aspects. The other aspect is to enhance and probably take it to the next step on how you create a much more flexible power grid, which is not just sustainable, but also serves a larger population with multiple failures due to weather conditions and others. Don't forget that this was originally done in a region like the Middle East, particularly UAE and then India, both of which at certain intervals have substantial tropical weather changes. So it affects the entire region ultimately. Consequently, the power grid used to get affected. So predictive maintenance was one of them, sustainability was another, and ensuring the power grid continuation and further development was the last one. For this, now for those who are actually well-versed with quantum, you need an average of 10 million quantum qubits, which is quite substantial. What do you think happens when you need such a large amount of qubits? What do you think you will require? You require infrastructure, right? And what happens when you require infrastructure? You require electricity, and more importantly, cooling systems. How do you cool that kind of infrastructure was the main challenge we had. For that, what we had done is ensuring that these 4 areas are being addressed through this particular project. For this took almost 3.5 years to develop, not the slide. The slide took 10 minutes. The project took 3.5 years. in which you have to do a complete full-fledged deployment of the entire system, assessing their hardware, assessing their software, their capabilities, and ultimately understand where do you need to reach to create a substantial demand response management. What does this response management means is your manpower may be there, but is the manpower trained and equipped to really handle and upgrade the technology? Since morning, and in all conferences, I always hear about optimization, technology, integrating, optimize, AI, quantum, very funny terms. Not everything needs optimization, number one. Number two, not everything needs technology. And number three, even if you implement the technology, are those humans going to be equipped to be self-trained or to be trained to really deal with the new technology in the first place? So that's where our challenges were mainly happening. You have to remember that most of this population in these two countries were not able to speak English. So for us, the training program in modules, which are mainly in English language, with a technology which is quite advanced, was a main challenge. So it's not so much the cooling and the electrical consumption, but the training program for these particular aspects. Let me just jump through this. You are not going to need this. Let me jump you through the case studies. There are two case studies I want to run you through, which we did benchmark in the past before we developed these ground-level applications. One is between Volkswagen and D-Wave. You both know these companies. The second one, I will come back to the slide, is you can see it on the side between Toshiba and Tohoku Electric. Now let me go back again. So these two cases will serve as a benchmark for you to understand what was done and why. You can imagine how the flow goes. It goes clockwise. So the objective is very simple. It's common to all of them. The objective is simple, common to all of them. But as you go in between the approach to the impact, implementation, and the final conclusion, what you observe is that it's very different from one another because, why do you think? Volkswagen and D-Wave are companies from which countries? One is German, the other is? Where is D-Wave from?
Canada.
Okay, and what about these two companies? Right, so even if the objective and the approach is the same, and the implementation tool also is going to remain similar, why does the impact and finally the cost and the timeline of deployment will change? Why do you think? That's why I asked you the country. Why do you think? Yeah, different network. What else do you think can be there? Yeah, lack of adaptation as well. Yes, what else? You can just drop the words. It's fine. I don't want this a monologue. This will have to be interactive. Yeah, the investment comes ultimately at the end, but how do you change? Ultimately, the objective is to optimize a power grid. Now, to optimize a power grid, and you need these two technologies, which ultimately are going to put further pressure on the power grid because of, well, consumption. Why two companies will come together? D-Wave is anyways into quantum, but why two companies will come together to ensure that this happens in that region in particular? Why these particular companies I've picked, and why these particular companies I've picked? Come on, why do you think? There is another layer to it. Besides the geography, besides the lack of adaptation, besides the pressure on the power grid, what else can be there? Yeah, financials is also there. Now let us not think as the tech side of it. Let's think of the business side of it. Volkswagen did what? Some 2-3 years back. I will not call it a scam, but yeah, a scam. But what happened? It's also a PR move. Exactly. Now, that's why I'm telling you, this is correct. So it's not just a technical requirement or geographical requirement, it's also a business need for a positioning base. So consequently, they have to move out from that campaign and move into more advanced technologies, which we are not doing till now. They're still not doing it anyways, but they're at least trying to partner with D-Wave and get into a point. Ultimately, the end objective, as you can see in the impact and the conclusion, is to create a much more sustainable, smarter grid, which creates an optimal consumption over a period of time, which is self-defined by itself. We are not trying to create algorithms that learn from the entire mechanism, but we are trying to create algorithms which are enhanced by certain qubits, which ultimately will self-optimize the grid by themselves without human intervention. That does not mean replacing the human side of it, but assisting it. So there was substantial discussions around all that. And where I want to run you through the other case is towards the outcome and the impact there. As you can see, when you mention it, there's an issue with the operational cost, but there is also an issue with the kind of power availability and manpower in the energy sector. So for those of you who would like to address this, it's not yet addressed. It's still a research gap available in the market, which is we all want to optimize the energy sector and the grids, but there is not enough manpower trained for it. Neither we know how to move forward to maintain a sustainable aspect among all these grid with the new developments, and neither how to integrate such a large amount of qubits, because 10 million is a tremendous amount of qubits, into a grid which is already saturated. Why we face this challenge, this is another case which I'll come across later. This is why we face a main challenge, because our operational costs are just humongous. If you look at a company-based investment, or you look at a country-based investment, which is the next slide, we are looking at a substantial multi-million investment over a period of time. Now, the same problem remains. When you develop this kind of grids, the qubits, the cooling factors, the energy consumption, plus the manpower issues, the regulatory aspects, and of course, political and governmental regulations prevent you from doing these kind of things. Apart from this, fortunately, in countries like India, Singapore, China, collection of data is not so over-regulated and privatized as it is in Europe. Hence, you can do a much more open-ended mechanism to collect data from you, the users of that energy, and create much more optimal mechanisms. As you know, in Europe, energy is quite expensive because now in the electrical sector as well as the water is raising costs till there is no tomorrow, particularly because there is not enough way to over-regulate that automatically because your data is private and you don't consent to it. So we are always in this fish chasing its own tail continuously, where we cannot regulate, but at the same time, you don't give permission for your data. So everything is not just the optimization part of it, but there is a business side of it, which is never getting deployed because of the same reason. Let me give you an anecdote, because I don't want to exceed the time, in line with this. And this you will find very interesting. You know, in a month's time, there will be for sure, which one we don't know, a new president of the US. Hopefully not Trump. But if that happens, did you know and did you hear the latest news that Trump did promise Elon Musk the BP? Not a chair in the Oval, the BP. Did you imagine what can happen if Elon Musk becomes BP of the US? Forget about the technology side and the monetary aspects of it. Focus on the business side of it. What do we do about that? And just dropping the bomb on your heads and you will figure out what that is. But this may occur. Now, all of these aspects do affect industries like this one, even projects like ours, which is in Dubai, which has nothing to do with the US directly, but there is a large influence from America in the UAE. Consequently affected the investment they made in the project, and we were out of India. So you can imagine the ripple effect that happens. But fortunately, as I said, we work out of India. There is not so much GDPR and privacy regulations, so we are good to go on that. So don't worry, since I work for an Indian university, I can collect your data and you cannot even do anything to me on that. Maybe I'm doing it right now, so we don't know that. Neither I've told you anything. And in interest of time, yeah, I'm 2 minutes. I have to self-regulate myself, so 2 minutes there. These are some of the challenges and considerations which I already repeated repeatedly over the last other presentation, which honestly I cannot emphasize enough. But what I would like to emphasize enough on, and this is just a brief of a brief of a brief, is a large matrix which runs horizontally and vertically across the board, but it's a PPT. I cannot put it in empirical format. This continues with measurements and different equations. There are aspects to be measured, obviously, and there are certain potentials. There are also measurements which are empirical in nature, which will come here, but all of them will depend geographically, population-wise, which target population you're going to target, what is the consumption rates, what kind of technology, a number of qubits you want to use, et cetera, et cetera. For the record, any average Indian city has a minimum of around 15 million people. So where we are based itself, in Hyderabad, that has 15 million, 1.5. So you can imagine the kind of power consumption that that takes. If you take Mumbai and New Delhi and Bangalore and other major metro cities, we are looking at about 25, 30 million, 40 million people, population of most of the European countries. So the kind of consumption is very different. Consequently, the need for this kind of project was there. Now it's already solved for now. And the same, Singapore has the problem. And another anecdote, before I leave any room for question, is Singapore is having a problem now trying to find places to place data center and quantum computers. Consequently, they are trying to place them on top of the skyscrapers. But again, there's an issue there because the architects come with the topic of sustainability, so they are always facing that challenge. So now Singapore is exploring sending them to space, where they cool automatically. But then environmentalists come with the topic of space garbage and space pollution. So there is no one solution that's going to fit all, but there is a problem that remains. The moment you deploy this kind of technology, you're going to face sustainability issues. So where do we head is unclear. And right on time with this, I will conclude. If you do have any questions, again, all of this is available on Google Scholar in an appropriate academic, empirical way, so it's there. But in 20 minutes, I cannot cover it possibly, so I didn't. I covered the holistics. If you have any questions, please ask. Otherwise, I will move on to the next speaker who was somewhere. I also recognize you are there in the morning. You had a question as well for somebody else. Yeah, go ahead. I don't think the mic is required. I mean.
Okay, well, I'm Max Potter. I work at Bailey Giffen. We've been interested in quantum stuff recently. You didn't talk much about quantum there. What quantum computers are you using? How many logical qubits? Are you solving real problems with them, or is this more of a speculative, this is coming down the line, we're getting ready for it?
No, we are solving problems. As I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, unfortunately, I was forced to sign a contract in which certain aspects of the technical deployment cannot be publicly mentioned, but I'll be very happy to mention it one-to-one, since there is no evidence I mentioned it. So I have to understand, I have certain position, I have to respect that much. But yeah, that's why I avoided to put it here. But again, all this is available on Google Scholar. It's a case. It's published as a case, it's published as a research paper, so it's there. Publicly, whatever has been published is public. I cannot go beyond a point. I would not like to be sued for now, but we can discuss afterwards, no problem. Yeah. Behind you. The mic is here.
Thanks. Jan Tchaikovsky from Shell. I have a question about the value that you estimate from the use cases that kind of quantum computing and quantum algorithms brought, on top of the regular, or like versus the regular standard approaches, classical.
Value meaning?
Dollars.
You mean how much it costs to deploy this?
Or what's your estimate for?
No, I can tell you realistics also, no problem.
What are we going to gain from using quantum algorithms, given all the constraints that you already mentioned?
So in this is a geographical case-based approach. So in this particular two regions, one is the south of India, which is two cities in particular, and then is Dubai, more concretely. These two regions, when it comes to the regular optimization mechanisms, was not sufficient versus the number of population and the consumption rates. So there was no order to accelerate that. Consequently, for us, how to put it simply, the gain was more than the damage created, given the population structure. However, if you deploy this kind of tool in Europe, in most of the European countries, the consumption rates are not as high to justify this kind of optimization. But it is in the Indian subcontinent and in Singapore and in Dubai because of the population versus consumption and issues that they have. If you're talking about pollution, sustainability, and the likes, it's not like in those countries care much about it. So that aspect is not considered by the government as actively as it is here. That's the reality of the ground. But they wanted to optimize. This is not our initiative. They hired us to deploy for them. So we did. So that's where the value comes in. If you want, in terms of dollars, initiating this in itself, you're looking at a minimum of 15 to 20 million just to deploy it. Just not the development behind the scenes, just the actual hardwares and the manpower salaries. The rest, time investment, number of years, deployment, corrections, corrective measures, testing, goes on. This is continuous expenditure. It does not stop it doesn't have a bucket to stop, basically. But as I said to him, all these details, I'll be very happy to do one-to-one. No problem.
Thanks.